Internet, welcome back to another episode of the Scamp Overkillander, where I'm taking this very neglected 1988 Scamp 13-foot and converting it into an off-grid, off-road Overlander. In the last episode, we finished up the rub rails, not calling them rock rails, got the 33s mounted and clearanced in the fiberglass. But they're off now because needed to reconfigure the garage to make room for the next project, which is the floor. If you are familiar with Scamps, especially old Scamps, you'll know what I'm talking about because they've got a floor made of OSB, which is oriented strand board, which is a bunch of wood chips glued together. In my case, there was a lot of leaks in this trailer and the previous owner did not fix them, so all of that wood has rotten and just crumbled away. So I refuse to put any more wood that's structural back into this thing. So I'm going to do what the internet, everybody seems to want to do, but nobody does. I'm making composite floors. Went to my local purveyor of composites, picked up a large pile of micelle foam, a large roll of chopped strand mat, a bunch of woven rosin, and the coup de grace, Kevlar. That's right. I said it was an overkill lander. Talking to my purveyor and told him what we were doing and the kind of loads that we're going to possibly experience with this, where the entire shell of the camper is supported on the floor and there could be a lot of bouncing up and down. He suggested Kevlar. Because it would give a lot more flexibility to the composite layup without letting it break. Although the price when we first looked it up was just astronomical, and I thought, well, there's no way I'm going to do it. But he said, I have some blue stuff on sale, and boy, I'm a geek, a tech geek, and I just couldn't turn that down. That just looks awesome. So this will be buried and probably never be seen, but I'll know it's there. So the first step and the thing that we need to do is we're going to make templates from the old floor panels, and we're going to lay them up on a big flat pane of glass. This is just a giant old window that I got off of Facebook Marketplace, thanks to my sponsor. It was free. So I don't know if I'm fairly familiar with working with composites. I restored an old bolt a few years ago, and I'm pretty comfortable with it. But there is a channel on YouTube that's no affiliation to mine, called Fish Bump TV. They have some awesome instructional videos if you're curious on how to do it. Things like this anyway, repairs and whatnot. So I would recommend looking them up. Like I said, no affiliation, I don't know them, but they do put out great content. So that's kind of where I got the idea for this. They really liked Kusa board, which I tried to get around here and couldn't find anybody. I couldn't even get the reps to call me back when I would send them messages. So they can not have my business. So yeah, the first step is we're going to get all of our layups cut out to our templates. Well, we're going to make templates first and then get everything prepped. And I'll get my lovely wife out here to give me a hand with the layups. And we're going to make them all in sections. The first part is the front floor. Yeah, so we're going to go with that and see how it goes. So for this video, I thought maybe I'd give a little commentary while we watch the time lapse. You'll have to let me know if you like it or not. But for the templates, we just used a big piece of cardboard and I traced out the original OSB floor after I pulled it out. I did my best to keep it in one piece so that I could use it as a template later. But we're cutting all of the fiberglass layers about an inch bigger all the way around, just to make sure that we had enough extra to trim to fit and get it just right. For this project, I did order a couple of pairs of extra heavy-duty shears because I knew we would have issues otherwise cutting through these thick layers of fiberglass roving. But with the Kevlar, right about here, I'm telling my wife how strong Kevlar is, and theoretically we should have a lot of trouble cutting it with scissors. And we're finding out that it doesn't actually work at all. Alright, so it's a couple days later, and I actually now have a set of real Kevlar shears. The listing said they were 6-inch shears, which my assumption was that they were 6-inch blades, but when they showed up, it actually turned out that the entire shear was 6 inches. So, little tiny cuts with the little tiny shears. Took quite a while to get through all 4 layers of the Kevlar. But it turns out Kevlar shears, I should say, are very sharp, and one blade has very small serrations in it. Kevlar is super hard and very slippery, so when you try to cut it with a regular shear, the fibers just kind of squirt out between the 2 shears and just basically fray if you're lucky. So the serrations grab onto the fibers of the Kevlar and hold it in place while the other half of the shear can cut through it. So for the chop strand, which this is, it functions as the bonding layer between rovens and the foam, but we actually chose this weight of it based on its finished thickness, and we were trying to math out what combinations would get us to close to 3/4. My vendor had all of the tech specs for the finished thickness once you've got it resined and cured. So we spent quite a bit of time just trying to come up with those layers. So the layup actually called for 3 layers of chop strand, but as you see, I can get 2 out of a sheet. So I traced out the 4th one, even though the layup called for 3. And I'm kind of glad I did, because later on I panicked and didn't think I was going to have the right thickness, so I added a 4th layer. And if I hadn't have at least traced it out, I would have kind of been in a stuck spot with that. Turns out I didn't actually need it, but I'm glad I did it. So after this, the last thing is the micelle foam, and I hadn't actually seen this in person yet, because you have to be very careful with it. If you step on it or crack it, put a dent in it, that will show through your layup. So I had just left it in the packaging, and was pretty afraid of doing any damage to it. So right now I'm discovering that it's actually narrower than the rolls of fabric. And for the front half of the Scamp, I was planning on getting 2 layers of foam out of one sheet, and it's $100 a sheet. So I didn't buy any extra. So what I decided to do was take the offcut from the center section and fill in the ears that I didn't quite have enough to do. Which is okay, because the foam really isn't structural, it's just there for volume. And in the tech specs for the foam, you are supposed to put in holes every so many inches and then actually score it. The vendor said for the 1/4 inch scoring really wasn't necessary, but you definitely need to put holes in. So what I did was just stack up my layers of foam, and then I had a scrap piece of pegboard that I just laid over the top and ran a drill through every few holes. Just made a grid pattern of holes. What the holes do is let the air escape from underneath the foam, and kind of gives an extra little bit of tooth, because the resin will come up and grab through. Okay, we're finally ready to start laying up our layers. We've got the glass waxed with mold release. We did 2 layers. 2 coats of the wax. The instruction says 3 to 5, but how many layers can glass actually take, right? It's a bit of foreshadowing there. But this first layer of Kevlar was a shit show to say the least. We had so many problems with it sticking and just not being able to get it to lay down in the right shape. Part of it was because we failed to factor in when we got the glass that we were going to be cutting the layers about 1 inch longer on each end. So the glass was just big enough for our finish size, but when we did the layups, we had an overhang on either side once we turned it 90. We originally were planning on doing it diagonal, but it was just too hard to get that to lay down on such a big table, so we ended up switching it to 90 degrees. Once the first layer was down, it really was pretty easy after that. This is the heavy woven layer that goes after the 2 layers of Kevlar. For the foam, you want to pre-wet it because it does absorb quite a bit of resin. In hindsight, I really probably should have pre-resined it and then let it cure. Just a little bit of layer to seal up the pores of the foam would have kept it from absorbing quite so much. So for the subsequent layers or floors, that's what I'm going to do. We kept our batches of resin small because you've only got about a 12-minute kick time on them. So we'd kind of do a small batch and lay up a section and do another small batch. So this is the chop strand mat. This is the binder layer between the woven layers and the foam. This absorbed a lot of resin. And then once you get your foam down, you basically have to weight it with something to push it down in. So we used a bunch of bricks. And what you're hoping to see here is a bit of the resin squirting up through the holes that you drilled, because that means that you've pushed out all of the air. You just want to make sure that you don't accidentally glue your bricks to the foam. So make sure you stay on top of it with a little chip brush and brush out any squeeze out. And make sure your holes are wide enough to accommodate your bricks. So here I'm just resining up the next layer of foam for later. Okay, it's the next morning. Got one side off. This was the easy side. But the way I'm doing it is you just take a regular old scraper, kind of get a corner started, and then you start using just regular old wood shims. And you start working them underneath there, and you get a little bit of pressure. I don't know if you can hear it. Starts making some snap, crackle, pop noises. As it's releasing, the glass, of course, has been waxed, before we did any of this. You just start working your way around and hoping to catch the last pop here, but I got a ways to go yet, so I'll set it down. Maybe we'll catch it. All right, first reveal. Check it out. Kind of looks like blue jeans. All right, so what this is 2 layers of Kevlar, one layer of woven roven, and then 1 layer of CSM, followed by a layer of 1/4 inch micelle foam. And that is basically going to be doubled. So the goal is to get 3/4 of an inch thick. Sweet. Okay, apologies, but I appear to have lost the footage of me adding on the second layer of foam. So this is later in the same day. The first half of the layup is done. I put 2 layers of CSM down, and then the second layer of foam, and then the bricks on top of that, and let that set up. I panicked a little bit. The layup schedule actually only called for 1 layer of CSM, but just kind of going off the measurements of what had been done so far, I thought I was going to be just a little bit shy of 3/4. So I last minute added on another layer of CSM here to make a little more thickness. But you can see this is the patched in layer of foam. I didn't have enough width from the sheet. And what I've done here is taken a bunch of CSM scraps and chopped them up into little tiny pieces, and then mixed that into some resin to make basically a reinforced resin. And I use that to just fill in the crack between the 2 sheets. I didn't want to have any voids, and I didn't really want to have a depression in the final layup, so I was trying to get that as even as possible. And then another little tip is that I started spreading this around with a chip brush, but I realized that I could just kind of dump it out and I had just a 6-inch drywall knife as a spatula, and just smeared it around that way. It went a lot quicker. On the foam, that is. It really wouldn't work on any of the layers of fabric. Now we have another layer of CSM. This is our binder layer between the foam and the woven layers. Reference you again to Fish Bump TV. They have so many great videos on, if you want specifics on how to do this stuff, way more than I could try to explain. But most importantly, do small batches of your resin, because you've only got 12-ish minutes for it to kick off, and then once after that happens, you don't want to use it. So once you've done a couple of them, you realize how quick it is to just make up another batch, and it really doesn't save you much time to do a big batch. The CSM really does take a lot of resin, as does this heavy woven. Then you do the bubble buster between each layer. Make sure everything is pressed down, no air is trapped in between. Just kind of start in the middle and move it out, and then just do left to right, front to back. Make sure you're pushing all the air out to the side. And then this would be the 3rd layer of Kevlar over the heavy woven. You can see how much more pliable it is when you're kind of doing the layup. You can move it around quite a bit, which can be good or bad. Not so helpful on a flat layup like this. Then just using a regular paint roller to apply the resin. It's another tip from Fish Bump. And then one thing I learned from the first layup was trim off your Barbie hairs that are sticking out from from the woven and keep them off. They're kind of a pain to clean up if they're stuck to the table afterwards. Again, this is the bubble buster, pushing everything in. Okay, it's been a few days since the final layup. Everything's been curing real nice. This is the side that was not cured against the glass, so it's got some weave texture to it. It actually looks pretty cool in person. Show you what it looks like on the other side. And then this is the side that was down against the glass. We definitely need to do better with our wax job next time. You can see all of these light spots is where it's stuck to the glass and pulled the thin layer of resin off. Not too worried about it. This piece was the first piece and it will be completely hidden. So it was kind of a little bit of a test. I wasn't really sure how it was going to turn out. But yeah, I think before this actually gets fully installed, I'll just go over this with another coat of resin to seal everything back up. But while that has been curing, I finished up the heater cubby for my little tiny diesel heater. Turned out pretty good. So I got to get this out now so that I can mark the underside of it when I put the board in, or put the floor in, so that I know where to make my access hole. That'll eventually be a door. Okay, you can see how I intentionally made the layers of the new composite floor bigger than the old template, or the old floor, which is the template. And that's just so that I can make sure that I get, for all the layers in there, everything is to nice solid layup. My first step is to trim out this leading edge so that I can get that fit into the camper, and from there I'll do the surrounding pieces once the nose is good and tight. I'm still not sure how I'm gonna cut the Kevlar, so that'll be a little bit of experimentation before I start going to town. The first thing that I tried was an abrasive disc on a grinder. I thought that would be the hot ticket, but it was pretty obvious that that was just going to make a big mess. And then from there I tried to switch to a worn out diamond blade on the same grinder. That really didn't do anything at all. And then I tried the oscillating tool, which did a pretty good job, but it was taking a while. And then finally I went to the jigsaw with the fine-tooth metal blade on it, and that was the hot ticket. It created far less mess, and it was actually cutting through it pretty good without really making a mess of things. Okay, this stuff cut pretty easy. Just about anything I tried worked okay, but by far the cleanest was a jigsaw with a metal blade. It destroyed the blade, brand new blade, but barely made a mess. Did a real nice job. The goal was to get to 3/4 of an inch, and I'm right there. Actually, I'm a little bit over, and that's probably my fault, because I was halfway through the layup and kind of panicked. I didn't think I was going to get to 3/4, so I put in a second layer of chopped strand mat between the two layers of foam. But you can kind of see the layup here. Just judging by how strong this piece is, this floor is just way overkill. The Kevlar is supposed to give some compliance and a little bit of give for big hits to avoid cracking, but man, I don't know. This is pretty crazy. I might make a bridge and just kind of do a little test standing on it. Okay, here we go. Deflection test. I jumped on the big portion first and that was uninspiring. So now I've got this little bridge right here blocked up. See what happens. Wow. Okay, fitting everything in now. I was pretty surprised. There was not a lot of trimming that I had to do to get this to fit. Maybe that's not a surprise. But what I didn't show is crawling around underneath and marking out all the different lines that I had to trim once I got it lined up in the camper itself. And I decided to try the circular saw for these straight edges. It did a pretty good job. Cut it no problem, but it really created this weird fur. If I call the pre-layup hair Barbie hair, I'm going to call this Muppet fur. It was super light and kind of like a cotton ball almost. This is just kind of the Kevlar as it got torn. The grinder with a flap disc did a really good job of kind of shaving it off the edges. The nice thing about the Kevlar is that it doesn't make you all itchy, the dust, like it does for fiberglass. It really wasn't bad. I didn't really want to take any risks on inhaling any of it, but as far as fiberglass work, this Kevlar stuff is actually surprisingly pleasant to work with. So all that's left now is to cut out my heater access door. This will be hidden under the dinette seat, but I also then want an access door so I can use it, the above portion, as storage through the magic of editing. You don't get to see all the Muppet hair trimming. And then I just went over, this is the side that was glassed down for the first layup and kind of had the blotchy spots where it stuck to the glass. So I just did it once over with the sander, give it a wipe down with acetone, and then I will give it a bit of resin just to seal everything back up. This was kind of interesting. I didn't think it would do this, but if you're familiar with woodworking, putting the sanding it and then putting another coat of resin kind of gave it a grain pop, like if you get wood wet after you sand it, it makes the grain lift. So this kind of turned that glassy surface into rough. Okay, a little status update. Got the finish trimmed out front panel for the floor. It's a lot of grinding and messy work that I didn't really film. Working on prepping the front of the frame. Everything that's going to get covered up has got a little bit of paint on it. Putting a rubber gasket in over the top of the frame. Have rib nuts inserted where everything is going to attach. My little diesel heater box cubby, I got some soundproofing in there to try and keep that quiet. So yeah, now it's just getting this thing, the floor installed permanent like, so then we can go around and glue the shell to it. All right, final setup. Putting in some temporary hardware. What I don't show you is I I really struggled with a couple of these nut certs. Somehow the threads got messed up and I ended up pulling everything out and running a tap through them to get the bolts to thread in. But once it was bolted in, I mixed up some basically a resin paste with resin and colloidal silica, kind of to a peanut butter consistency, and then smeared that in with a tongue depressor into the gap, and then stuffed some scraps of chopped strand mat into the bigger gaps, basically going all the way around with one layer of just slivers of scrap. Because everything is curved, you really got to do small pieces. You don't get to go and do one big old piece all the way across the front. So once you have a little fill-in with the scraps, you can go to slightly bigger pieces. So these are about 1 inch on the wall and side. I'm sorry, wall and floor. Just kind of working those in, trying to improve the transition from floor to wall. Okay, a few hours later, I have got the transition all glued in. This is just some thickened resin with colloidal silica, and then followed by a bit of chopped strand mat. And the purpose of this is really not for strength, but it's really to just get a smooth transition from floor to wall. We don't want any sharp bends in it because the layup won't really work that well. So now that that is in and mostly set up, it's time to start layering on a few levels of Kevlar to really tie in the floor to the wall. Okay, working on the Kevlar, just like the fiberglass, starting out with some small pieces. Although, because we've got a transition already in there, I don't need to go quite as small, but basically using up a bunch of scrap material just to kind of get the first small transition layer down. It's probably about 1 inch top to bottom, or for each part of the floor and wall. You can see how much easier this is to work with than the chopped strand mat. It's super pliable. Whips in real fast, takes the resin really well. Now going back over with another layer that overlaps. So this one is probably about double the size as far as its height goes. Also, you can tell I went quite a bit more aggressive with the length of the pieces. That does bite me a little bit in the tight corners, especially this one coming up. It was really bunching up. I had to get in there and cut a couple of relief notches, and even then I still had to wrestle with it. So in your corners, I'd recommend keeping your pieces small. They go in a lot easier. Conform to the transitions. Okay. I think that's officially 2 world's firsts in 2 episodes. Pretty sure nobody's put a Kevlar floor in a Scamp before. So, let's do a wrap up. That's enough for this episode. What did I do, and would I do it again? Good question. So currently my layup is consists of chopped strand mat, 18-ounce chopped strand mat, 18-ounce woven rovin, micelle foam, 1/4 inch, and then 1500D Kevlar. There's a sandwich of 2 layers of Kevlar on the outside, woven rovin, and then chopped strand mat, foam, chopped strand mat, foam, chop strand mat, woven, 2 layers of Kevlar. The main thing there is that you want to put your chop strand between your woven layers, like as the adhesive to the foam. The chop strand does a much better job sticking to other things than woven layers do. And then working with my vendor, we were going for the requirement of 3/4 inches total, which is just super overkill for fiberglass. So that's why there's foam in there. It would have been insanely expensive and heavy if it was all fiberglass. Really working with him and his suggestions on the kind of abuse that this might take, and then also the unknowns. The main reason he was pushing for Kevlar, while I believe it is super overkill, is the unknown of how it would do, because you have this overhang. Your floor is mounted to the frame on a Scamp, and then it basically hangs out in space and then is glassed to the shell. You can get a good example or a good view of that. Here's the original OSB floor, just hanging out there. There's no support for it aside from the floor. So taking this off-road, we're not really sure the impacts of the weight of the shell coming down on that, what it would do to fiberglass, because a 3/4 inch layup is going to be just monstrously stiff. He was uncertain if it would hold up and just be too stiff and actually cause it to crack. So the Kevlar is a safety net basically to give it some compliance. It's super strong, but it will actually make the layup more flexible. So that's the main reason we went with that. Would I do it again? I don't know. Maybe. First off, if it wasn't on sale, the Kevlar that is, no. There's no way. My hesitation is with how hard it is in some regards to work with. The weave is just super slippery, which is nice because the slipperiness makes the weave super malleable. Like it just, you can form it into pretty much any shape, compared to like chop strand mat where this is stiff and you've really got to work it hard to get it into like a corner. But that super slippery attribute is tough in some regards because if you snag it on a piece of a splinter or something sharp, it just falls apart. I keep trying to find a thread here. You just pull the whole thing apart. This comes apart. So when you're trying to lay it up and you get these hairs, one starts and then another one, and it just snags in your brush, and all of a sudden you've got a big Barbie hair mess. And the other thing is that it really takes well to resin, but almost too well. It's a light weave. So when you're trying to do like a big layup like this, I don't know how I'm going to manage this great big panel. Because as you're trying to roll it out, it's really floppy because it's so light. And if one corner just hits the wetted out area, it just sucks down and sticks there. And if you try to move it, it just starts pulling the weave apart. So you have to be really careful, really need 2 people to work on it. Honestly, the Roven is the same. It's a very slippery weave, but nowhere near like this is. And then the third thing with Kevlar is the special tooling that you need. I already went over the special scissors that I had to get. And then to try and drill a hole in it or cut it after it's laid up is difficult. I ended up using a Forstner bit to cut through the for the bolt holes. For the edges, I used a circular saw, but that frayed a lot and liked to wind up around the blade. So Kevlar likes a lot of speed and really, really sharp edges and serrations if you've got them. but those don't really exist in power tools, or especially hand tools. So I think a regular 3/4 layup with regular fiberglass and the foam would be honestly plenty strong. If you're not off-roading like I am, it would be way more than enough. You know, if you've just got a wood floor and you're trying to get rid of rot, or, you know, kind of like I am, but you're not planning on taking it off-road, yeah, a woven and chop strand floor with this stuff in between is way more than adequate, I would say. Yeah, so the next episode, now that the front is attached, we get to tackle this mess. So the rotten 3/4 OSB is getting out so that I can have access to the back half of the frame. So I still have to finish up my bracing on the original frame. I'm going to add a receiver hitch to the center of it and reconstruct the rear bumper to be more substantial than a piece of angle iron. And also I need to figure out how to mount a 33-inch spare tire. They're not light. And the original spare, I don't know if you've ever taken it off of your Scamp, but the original spare is just a bolt sticking through the fiberglass, and the spare is just hanging there. Mine is all puckered out just from the weight of the little tiny spare. So that obviously won't do for a big off-road tire. So yeah, thanks for watching. The next episode, there's a lot to do, but I think most of it is figured out already. So it should be pretty wham bam. See you next time.